Hey ladies, welcome to the Lifestyle MD podcast. Are you a woman physician or healthcare provider who is struggling to prioritize your health and fitness? Are you afraid that putting your needs first makes you selfish and it gets in the way of your roles as a doctor, a wife, or a mom? Are you tired of starting and stopping fitness programs only to find yourself falling back into old self-sabotaging habits? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then this podcast is for you. I am your host, Dr. Angela, a duly board certified internal medicine pediatrics physician, wife, mom, stepmom, and your fit lifestyle coach. This podcast will move you from running on empty and wishing you are in better health to pouring from a full cup and living your best fit life indefinitely. All right, let's get into it. Hey, this is Dr. Angela, and this is another episode of the Lifestyle MD. In this episode, we are continuing on the series of nutrition. I'll be breaking down fat in this episode. If you haven't listened to the prior episodes, I recommend that you go back and listen to that. But here today, we'll be specifically focusing on the topic of dietary fat specifically. And I have a special guest with me today, my brother. No particular reason other than the fact that he was here and I thought it would be fun to record an episode with him. So go ahead and introduce yourself, bro.
How you doing, everybody? My name is Brandon. Let's have a good show today.
All right. So today, like I said, we are going to talk about fat. And the first thing I'm going to do, similar to my other episodes, is I'm going to first explain what dietary fat is, and then I'm going to break down why it's important. And then finally, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about how to think about fat in your diet. In other words, how much fat should you be consuming relative to your other nutrients, macronutrients, and what should you be getting your fat sources from. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so the very first thing I'm going to get into is just basically what is dietary fat. So, bro, what do you think dietary fat is?
Like we were discussing earlier, grew up in the 90s. So what I thought fats were bad, because basically what everybody told you fats were bad. From 90s to now, I've just recently been told there are some good fats.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And that's actually one of the most frustrating things about fats is that a lot of patients will say to me, oh, but I don't really eat a high fat diet or whatever. I try to eat low fat. There are still some people that are stuck in that 90s mindset where they think fat is bad, but fat is not necessarily bad. So first of all, low fat, no fat, not great. And also I would argue high fat is not great. So what do you think dietary fat is?
That is a good question because I do not know.
All right. So dietary fat. So when you think about the foods that you eat, fat comes from two main categories. There's a third one, but we'll talk about that a little bit separately. There's saturated fat and unsaturated fat. You've heard those terms before,
Yes,
right?
I have.
Yep. And then there's also trans fat.
The very popular one.
Yes. Popular in a not so good way. Trans fat is the devil. So trans fat is actually truly the only fat that you really need to avoid. It is actually artificial fat.
Makes everything taste so good.
Yeah, exactly. So trans fat has been added to foods. It is somewhat, basically they've taken plant-based fats and then added some things to it, some chemical changes, and it's really not natural to the body. It's not good for you at all. So if there's any fat you should avoid, it's actually trans fats. But you actually do need a certain amount of saturated fats in your diet.
Okay.
About at least for sure, less than 10% of your diet should come from saturated fats. And then the rest should primarily come from unsaturated fats. So where do you get saturated fats from?
I was going to ask you that question. Would that be like peanuts or anything like that, or any kind of nuts, beans, or
that's going to be your
dairy?
Unsaturated fats.
Okay.
Yeah, so saturated fats are solid at room temperature and unsaturated fats are not solid at room temperature. The thing that's kind of confusing is that foods that contain saturated fat, so meat, can contain a little bit of unsaturated fat too. But you pretty much only get saturated fats from meat and dairy.
Okay.
So most Americans eat a lot. How much do you think Americans tend to eat?
Let's be honest, we eat way too much.
Yes. And so saturated fats, because of the overabundance of saturated fats in our diet, there is a lot of talk. You might hear the American Heart Association, your doctors, and they always say avoid saturated fats. We're not trying to tell you not to eat any saturated fats. We're just trying to tell you not to make it the most prevalent fat in your diet. So we talked a little bit about what saturated fats are, meat and dairy. What are unsaturated fats? Where do you get those from?
I said I should know this answer. I heard this a lot, but
You
unfortunately,
just told me.
oh yes, your beans and your nuts and
Well,
whatnot.
not so much the beans, but definitely
Peanuts.
the nuts and the seeds.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And there's an important role for unsaturated fats in your diet. Your body actually makes most of the fat you need from, nutrients that you get from other sources, but there are some fats your body cannot make. And those are called essential fats, or the essential fatty acid: omega-3, omega-6, and DHA.
Yes, I always see commercials for supplements that have those in it.
Exactly. So omega-3 comes from fish and flaxseed. Your omega-6 comes from your nuts and your seeds and some canola oil. And DHA is a type of omega-3. So these are fats that you can only get from your diet. Now, most people get plenty of omega-6, but not very much omega-3.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That is very surprising.
Mm-hmm. So omega-3 is a very important fatty acid. It's super important for reducing your inflammation. It's one of the things that we usually recommend that people supplement. But as with most things, I will tell people supplements are not the cure to a bad diet. So like I said, fish or flaxseed. So I will often add flaxseed or flax powder to like a smoothie or add it to my yogurt. We do actually, I think my husband and I actually eat, well, I actually don't know if we have any fish oil supplements right now, but at one point we're taking omega-3 fish oil supplements, but we actually include fish in our diet on a weekly basis.
Oh, that's good. Who doesn't like
specifically salmon?
Who doesn't like salmon?
I know. Well, there are people out there that don't like salmon. I feel sorry for those folks, but not just any salmon.
What kind?
Wild caught salmon.
Ooh.
Yes, wild caught salmon. But not everyone can get wild caught salmon. So if you can't get wild caught salmon, or salmon for that matter, just get whatever kind of fish you can get a hold of, but don't fry it.
Oh, now you're taking all the fun out of it.
So, I mean, you can have it every now and then, but fried fish is definitely not your friend. So, big picture, you consume dietary fat. Your body takes that fat, breaks it down into fatty acids. That fatty acid goes into your bloodstream, and then your bloodstream or your body uses it for important building blocks. So, let's get a little bit into the importance of fat. What does your body need to use fat for?
Mostly, from what I understand, mostly energy, because your body has to burn something off throughout the day if you're not eating.
Yep. So exactly. So if you don't have any carbohydrate intake, yes, your body can use that stored fat. So that's exactly what you're talking about is the stored fat. So most of us see stored fat in our bodies in the form of the body fat, the extra cushion. Some people have more stored body fat than others.
Yes.
But there are some hidden uses for dietary fat and fatty acids that most people don't think about. It's used by your cell membrane. So all of your cells are made by a layer, which is a lipid layer, which is made of fat. So your body needs fat to make those cellular membranes, the outer part of your cells.
Okay.
Your brain and your nerves rely heavily on fat. It's primarily made from lipids for both the protection and the actual making of those nerves. And also your body needs fat in order to absorb certain vitamins. Your absorption of vitamin A, D, E, and K is dependent on fat.
So a certain amount of fat is important for a person to have.
Yes, exactly. And then the final thing is it actually helps protect your bones and organs as padding. So
now I have a question. No shade to anybody, but a lot of people out there have very low body fat percentage. Now, how healthy is that?
That is a great question, bro. So low body fat percentages are not good for long periods of time. Your body, especially, now this podcast specifically is targeting women. Now I'll speak from a woman's point of view. Low body fat affects your hormones. So body or fat is important for hormone production. So if your body has a very low percentage of body fat, it's going to hinder your body's natural production and your natural balance of hormones. So that's also not good. Not to mention the fact that you don't have extra protection for those bones and those other organs.
Hey, so just a little bit of fat, not too much.
So just say a little bit more about that. Having too little body fat can disrupt your body's natural regulation of blood sugar, cholesterol, energy storage, and the reproductive hormones and metabolism. So that's a very big deal for women. So women, there's this concept of I can't remember what it's called right now, but basically if you have like the athletic triad. So women who are athletes who have very low body fat percentages, their body fat gets too low, they'll actually stop having menstrual cycles. You won't be able to reproduce. And so for some women that may not be a big deal, but actually not having regular menstrual cycles during your normal young reproductive years can also have an impact on your bone health. So it has many complications. So you should naturally have body fat. Not to mention the fact that women inherently should have higher body fat than men. We need it in order to have normal functioning bodies. So unless you're going to be doing a competition or, bodybuilding show, you will notice that most women, if they're doing that kind of stuff, they stay in that low body fat percentage just for a short period of time.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't want to stay there. Great question.
Thank you.
So another important role for fat, taste.
Yes. The best part.
Yes. So fat does help with the taste of food. So you still, it is, you don't want to completely eliminate fat because it doesn't taste good. Now, why or where should you be getting your fat from?
Preferably something more natural, but nowadays it's kind of hard to find anything that's like at least affordable that's natural fats, because not everything has all these, like you said earlier, all this non natural fats. Everything's grown in the laboratory. So where should I get them? Like you said, where should I get them from?
Right. That's a great question. So I'll go back to one of my earlier episodes where I talked a lot about quality. Quality is the very first cue I tell people to think about. And if nothing else, if before you start thinking about how much fat you should be taking in, you should be thinking about what is the source, what is the quality of the fat that I'm eating, just like the quality of the protein, the quality of carbohydrates. And I like to think about that in terms of like the most natural, least processed version possible. Like you said, a lot of people get many of their foods throughout the day from processed sources and convenient sources. So things that they can pick up and eat because it requires time. It also requires money to buy things that are fresh, and fresh foods and things like deteriorate faster.
That is true. Like, unfortunately, where I work at, we have a lot of processed foods offered to us. We have, I'm not going to say the name of the company. We have a lot of vendors who come by and sell food to our employees. And also we have a cafeteria full of kind of like a little store, it has stuff you can buy as you go, but mostly, obviously, it's all mostly processed foods. Mm-hmm. So it's like it says, depending where you, like you say, we should eat healthy, but speaking of fats, it's kind of hard to do that nowadays, especially if you're on the go, you don't have time.
Yep. And you know what? That's something that is very common for women physicians, professional women, working moms. You're always on the go. You're trying to squeeze in as much as possible in as little time as possible. And unfortunately, a lot of hospital cafeterias actually, I should say ours seems to be getting a little bit better, but they still offer a lot of options, the convenient options, the unhealthy options. So if you're relying on getting your food from convenient sources, be that the cafeteria, something accessible to your job, or convenient sources, chances are it's not great. Just to be honest, it's not great. So healthy fat sources are going to be predominantly the unsaturated fats. So avocados, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, seeds, nut butters, even dark chocolate can be a good source of fat.
Dark chocolate.
Yes, I know. Flaxseed, chia seed. So like there's lots of other, so basically nuts and seeds is what it comes down to.
All right.
And when it comes to cooking with oil, there's some oils that tend to be used that are not great. So what kind of oils should we try to avoid?
Canola,
yes. Canola oil, vegetable oil, and actually coconut oil is like the only plant-based oil that's not great for you. It's actually high in saturated fat.
That is what I hear.
Yes. So the interesting thing, a lot of this stuff is actually making it into the mainstream. So more and more people are aware of it. And corn oil.
Now, that's no surprise. They've been saying that for years. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, corn oil is easy to produce.
Mm-hmm.
Cheap.
Very inexpensive.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So chances are, part of the reason that all of the inexpensive, easily accessible food is cheap is because it's made with cheaper ingredients.
Yep.
So, bro, I know for you, when I talk, my audience, the people that I'm primarily talking to are physicians. You're not a physician, and I know that you have different constraints than I do. How can you practically go about getting healthier, more whole food in your diet on a daily basis?
The best thing to do for me, especially, I take my own lunch to work. I don't like buying anything that's processed. Cook your own meals and try to use healthy ingredients.
Yep.
But now for me, a lot of times that's a little harder because, sometimes the best ingredients, like I said, for me, financially impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to, at least try to add the most healthy things I possibly can. Try to lay off a lot of the fried foods. Much as I love how they taste, try to lay off the fried foods. But like I said, best thing to do is take your own lunch and put what you think is healthy in there, instead of buying the things off the shelf. Because like I said, all the stuff that's on the shelf is designed to last a while.
Mm-hmm. You got it. You hit the nail on the nose. And there are ways to get healthier options, less expensive. Well, I have a garden, and everything in the garden you can't eat all at once, so I'll freeze things. So frozen fruits and vegetables and grains and all that are also healthy. So if you are buying, you don't have to buy things fresh. You can buy things frozen. So in order of preference in terms of quality, fresh, frozen, and then last resort would be canned. And if you get things that are canned, you should get things that are low in sodium.
I was going to ask you, what is the reason why cans back has so much sodium in it?
Yep, because they use a lot of sodium. But basically, they need it to be shelf stable. Sodium is one of the things that makes canned items shelf stable.
Okay.
So the final thing I'm going to talk about is how much fat you should be consuming.
Oh, ideally, I don't know, but I know for me, I should probably be consuming a little bit less.
Yeah, why do you think so?
Not only because it's for healthier reasons, because, if you're eating too much fat, you can put on that weight a lot faster than you can take it off.
Mm-hmm.
And, adding, like you said, there is good, your body's supposed to have a certain amount of fat, but you have too much, it can cause a lot of long-lasting health problems.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how much fat should I be intaking?
Well, so it's not as a straightforward of an answer as I would hope. But of course, I'm not giving anyone straightforward answers on here because, of course, I do offer coaching. If you want to know the nitty gritty details, you need to work with me. But besides that, first thing I need to point out is that fat intake, like dietary fat, does not equal body fat. If you eat fat, it doesn't get put in your body as fat. Right?
Okay.
So your body breaks down that fat into fatty acids and then uses it. At the end of the day, the body fat you have is what your body has converted into fat after it has stored energy. Whatever it has left over that it doesn't use gets converted into fat. So fat intake from your diet does not equal body fat. Okay. First things first. So fat as a macronutrient has more calories per gram than both carbohydrates and protein. So this kind of gets a little bit complicated. I'll have to maybe my next episode I'll get into like calorie counting versus macronutrient counting, and it's probably a good topic for nutrition. But we want about 20 to 30% of all of our calories to be coming from the fat in our diet. It's probably a lot higher than most people think. But really, it depends on what your goals are.
So for somebody like me, I should probably focus on my goals a little bit more. But if I, let's say my goal is just a simple workout to try to burn fat, how much should I be intaking?
Yeah. So if you're thinking about fat in terms of losing body fat,
yep,
then really, you can stick with that 20 to 30% range, and really probably around 30% is a good target. And what I usually recommend to my clients and my patients is, if you are tracking macronutrients and you're trying to be mindful of what you're eating, don't just pick a number and stick with it. You need to kind of adjust things. So what may work for you may not work for someone else, because maybe your activity level and your nutritional needs are going to be slightly different than what you think. So start off with a number and then allow yourself to adjust it. So as an example, when I was training for bodybuilding, and I was paying very close attention to my fat and my macronutrients, all of my macronutrients. In the earlier stages of my training, I had like a fat content of around 20 to 30%. But as I got closer to later stages of training, my fat content got down to 10%. So that's not ideal for most people. You actually should be having a minimum of somewhere around 15 to 20% of your caloric intake coming from fat. So I'll just say this: minimum fat content for your diet should be around 15 to 20%, and anything beyond that will vary. Now, there is a ratio, and the ratio is like 50, 35, and 15%. That's kind of like the baseline ratio for what's ideal for fat loss. But again, don't take my word for it. You need to work with a professional, someone who can monitor your progress. But if you're trying to start from somewhere, you can start with 50% from carbs, 35% from protein, 15% from fat, and then modify it from there.
Now the question though, how do you figure these out for an average person like myself? How much, those numbers I need to look for?
Honestly, I would recommend that you don't look at the numbers.
No.
I'm just kind of telling you this like big picture so that you can kind of think about, like if you're eating a meal, like, and you're looking at thinking about the nutrients in any given meal, just make sure that no more than 1/3 of the calories in that meal are coming from fat.
Okay.
That's a good place to start. Where I want the average person on a daily basis to start is with quality.
Okay.
First, understanding that fat is not bad, but there are good sources and not great sources of fat. And then you don't want fat to make up more than 30% or more than 1/3 of all your calories.
Yeah, and it comes back to, unfortunately, the way everything is set up nowadays, we have all these fast food restaurants and, companies, like say, your where you work at, where I work at, they offer these unhealthy options. Like you said, it makes it hard.
It does make it hard, which is why I always push the importance of packing your own food and planning ahead. Because if you plan ahead, then you're less likely to be tempted by those unhealthy options.
Yes.
Then you don't have to worry about being hungry and making bad choices. So counting macronutrients, counting protein, carbs, and fat, like down to like the gram level, is really an advanced nutrition technique. And it's something that you should do if you're trying to achieve a specific body composition, or if you're striving for a certain athletic performance. But for the everyday person, I just kind of like big picture, I want people to understand what proteins are, what carbs are, what fats are, why they're important, and how to choose healthy choices. For most people, they just need to start with quality, getting good protein, getting good carbohydrates, and getting good fat.
All righty. That
Any
sounds
other
like
questions, bro?
You know what? That's probably the first time I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, that's a first. All right. So thank you all for joining me today. This has been another episode of the Lifestyle MD. Today we covered fat, talked about the importance of fat, what fat is, and how much fat you should be getting in your diet. Remember, low fat, no fat is not healthy. We all need a certain amount of fat in our diet for normal daily bodily functions. If you have any additional questions or anything else you specifically want to hear, you can also email me at angela.lifestylemd@gmail.com. Remember that I am a health coach for women doctors and women professionals who are interested in improving their health and overall well-being. And that is it for today. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this episode and others with someone else who may also benefit. Until next time, this has been the Lifestyle MD, and I am your host, Dr. Angela. This has been another episode of the Lifestyle MD. Special thank you to Lou Musa for the show theme music, created with Free Photography and Makeup by Janae for the cover photo. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you haven't already, please subscribe today and share with another woman doctor who may benefit. You may also follow me on Instagram at Angela Lifestyle MD. I am Dr. Angela. Thank you for joining me today.